History is almost always written by those who conquered, carved into the monuments of empires that forced the world to bend to their will. But there are hidden places where history refuses to be tamed. Deep within the rugged, mist-veiled peaks of Jamaica's Blue Mountains, a different kind of history was forged. It was a history written not in ink, but in blood, brilliant strategy, and an unyielding desire for absolute freedom. This is the chronicle of a woman who defied the greatest military empire of her era. A woman who became a general, a spiritual anchor, and a living nightmare for the British crown. She is known to the world as Nanny of the Maroons, the Unconquered Queen. Born around the late 1680s, Nanny was a child of the Asante, or Ashanti people. The Ashanti were a proud, fiercely martial society, deeply rooted in a complex tapestry of spiritual traditions, strict social structures, and unparalleled guerrilla military strategy. Nanny was raised steeped in these traditions. She was initiated into the profound mysteries of Obeah, a spiritual practice of cosmic alignment, healing, and protection that traveled across the waters in the hearts of the captive. From her elders, Nanny learned the art of unexpected warfare, the secrets of botanical medicine, and the psychological tactics required to dismantle an enemy from within the shadows. She was a daughter of warriors, holding a lineage that prized honor and autonomy above life itself. But the turn of the 18th century brought an era of immense darkness. The insatiable European hunger for sugar, the white gold of the Caribbean, turned the West African coast into a hunting ground. Millions were stolen, stripped of their names, and packed into the suffocating, disease-ridden hulls of slave ships. Among them, torn from her ancestral soil alongside her brothers, Cudjoe, Accompong, Johnny, and Quao, was the young woman who would become Nanny. The Middle Passage was a crucible of horror, a systematic attempt to break the African spirit. Yet, as the ship anchored in the harbors of Jamaica, the captors did not realize they had imported the very seeds of their own destruction. Upon arriving, Nanny and her brothers were sold into the brutal plantation economy of Jamaica, the crown jewel of the British plantocracy. It was a hellscape of forced labor where the life expectancy of an enslaved person on a sugar estate was often less than 10 years. But Nanny's spirit could not be chained. The rigid discipline of the plantation was entirely incompatible with her royal blood. She looked past the boundaries of the estate toward the towering, jagged peaks that dominated the island's interior. To the British, it was an impassable, hostile wasteland. To Nanny, it looked like home. It looked like freedom. In the dead of night, executing a meticulously planned escape, Nanny, along with her brothers and a small group of determined men and women, broke their shackles and fled into the wilderness. They did not merely run away, they revolted. They chose the uncertainty of the wild over the guaranteed slow death of the plantations. This act of defiance marked the birth of their new identity. They were no longer slaves, they were Maroons, a term derived from the Spanish word cimarron, meaning wild, untamed, and free. As they ascended into the highlands, the physical toll was immense. The terrain was unforgiving, requiring sheer physical endurance to navigate the vertical cliffs and dense undergrowth. But under Nanny's visionary leadership, the fugitives organized. While her brother Cudjoe moved westward to lead the leeward Maroons, Nanny and her brother Quao established a stronghold in the east, deep within the Blue Mountains of Portland Parish. This sanctuary would come to be known as Nanny Town. It was more than a settlement. It was a sovereign African state thriving right under the nose of the British Empire, a fortress of liberty carved out of the sheer mountain rock. Nanny Town was a marvel of strategic engineering and communal survival. Perched on a steep ridge over an 800-foot drop, the settlement was virtually invisible from below and completely inaccessible to anyone who did not know the secret, treacherous paths. Nanny designed the town with absolute military precision. There was only one narrow path leading up to the settlement, allowing a mere handful of Maroon warriors to hold off an entire army. Survival required more than just defense. It required a completely self-sustaining society. While the British assumed the escaped Africans would starve in the wilderness, Queen Nanny organized a highly sophisticated agricultural system. Under her direction, the Maroons cleared hidden plots of land to cultivate yams, plantains, cassava, and sweet potatoes. They raised livestock and mastered the art of hunting wild hogs, preserving the meat using unique blends of mountain spices and smoking techniques, a practice that birthed the world-famous Jamaican jerk. Nanny understood that the survival of her people depended heavily on their psychological and spiritual unity. She established a governance structure rooted in Asante customs, where she ruled as the undisputed spiritual, military, and political leader. She was the chieftainess. Every decision, from agricultural distribution to diplomatic relations, passed through her. To maintain communication across the vast fractured ridges of the Blue Mountains, Nanny utilized the Abeng, a side-blown horn fashioned from a cow's horn. The Abeng was a sophisticated instrument of psychological warfare and long-distance communication. Its unique, piercing tones could travel across miles of dense forest, carrying complex, coded messages that the British could never decode. A specific cadence could warn of approaching troops, call for a gathering, or signal an ambush. For the British soldiers marching through the valley below, the eerie, disembodied sound of the Abeng echoing through the mist was a psychological torment, an acoustic reminder that they were being watched by an unseen enemy. To the British colonial authorities, Queen Nanny was not just a rebellious leader, she was an existential terror. They viewed her through a lens of deep racial fear and profound ignorance, labeling her as a rebel witch who commanded supernatural forces. The British records from the era speak of her with a mixture of hatred and awe, attributing her military successes to dark, inexplicable sorcery. In reality, Nanny's power stemmed from her profound mastery of Obeah, the ancestral spiritual science of West Africa. In the Maroon community, Obeah was not evil. It was a sacred system of protection, justice, and healing. Nanny was a high priestess, a spiritual conduit who connected her people to the power of the ancestors and the natural world. She used her deep knowledge of indigenous botany to create powerful medicines, healing wounded warriors with herbs that British doctors had never encountered, ensuring her fighting force remained resilient and strong. The legends surrounding Nanny's spiritual prowess grew to mythic proportions, striking deep psychological terror. The most famous of these legends is the myth of the pot. It was said that Nanny possessed a magical cauldron that boiled without any fire underneath. According to the stories, when British soldiers approached Nanny Town, they would look into the clearing and see this mysterious pot boiling. Enticed by curiosity, they would draw closer, only to lose their footing or balance and fall over the cliffs to their deaths. Modern historians view this legend as a brilliant metaphorical representation of her mastery of camouflage, traps, and psychological ambush. Another enduring legend claims that Queen Nanny was entirely bulletproof. It was believed that she could catch incoming British musket balls with her bare hands, or even within her clothing, and fire them back at her enemies. While these stories sound like pure folklore, they served a vital strategic purpose. They instilled absolute, unshakable confidence in her Maroon warriors, making them fearless in battle. Simultaneously, it demoralized the British redcoats, who believed they were fighting an immortal, supernatural entity. Nanny weaponized faith and folklore, turning spiritual belief into an impenetrable shield for her people. By the 1730s, the tension between the expanding British plantation complex and the Free Maroons exploded into open, sustained conflict, known historically as the First Maroon War. The governor of Jamaica ordered a total war of extermination against Nanny and her followers. The British military deployed their finest regular troops, backed by local militias and the Black Shot, enslaved men forced to fight against the Maroons. They marched into the Blue Mountains with heavy artillery, conventional European tactics, and bright red uniforms that made them incredibly easy targets against the vibrant green backdrop of the jungle. They expected a swift, decisive victory. They could not have been more wrong. Queen Nanny revolutionized guerrilla warfare in the Western Hemisphere. She mastered the art of environmental camouflage. Maroon warriors would cover themselves completely from head to toe in vines, leaves, and tree bark, standing completely still along the narrow mountain tracks. British columns would march right past them, completely unaware, until the trees themselves seemed to open fire. Nanny's tactical genius was defined by the hit-and-run ambush. Her warriors would strike with lethal precision from the ridges, unleash a devastating volley of fire, and vanish back into the mist before the British could even form a line of defense. The First Maroon War became a grueling, bloody war of attrition. The British treasury was drained, and thousands of redcoats perished not just from maroon musket balls, but from yellow fever, exhaustion, and sheer psychological collapse. The climax came in 1734, when a British force managed to drag heavy swivel guns up to a ridge overlooking Nanny Town. In a surprise bombardment, the British rained fire down upon the settlement, destroying the huts and forcing the Maroons to abandon their sanctuary. But Queen Nanny was far from defeated. Showing incredible resilience, she led the survivors deeper into the wilderness, executing a brilliant tactical retreat across the mountains. They rebuilt, reorganized, and continued their campaign of resistance, proving that Nannytown was an unextinguishable state of mind. By 1739, the British government was on the brink of financial and military ruin in Jamaica. Acknowledging the impossibility of a military victory, Governor Edward Trelawney took a step that shocked the colonial world. He sued for peace. The treaties offered the Maroons exactly what they had fought for: official recognition of their freedom, sovereignty over vast tracts of mountain land, and complete autonomy from British law. However, the treaties came with a dark, painful compromise. In exchange for their freedom, the Maroons were required to capture and return any new runaway slaves who tried to escape the plantations. While other Maroon leaders accepted the terms to ensure the survival of their people, Queen Nanny was fiercely opposed. To her, signing a treaty that required returning fellow Africans to chains was a profound betrayal of the very concept of freedom. Eventually, facing the exhaustion of her people, Nanny accepted a modified agreement, securing 500 acres of land for her people, which became New Nannytown, known today as Moortown. The exact date and circumstances of Queen Nanny's death remain shrouded in mystery, but Maroon oral tradition insists she lived to an advanced age, passing peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the free society she fought so hard to build. In 1976, the government of Jamaica formally declared Queen Nanny a national hero, the only woman to hold this highest distinction. Today, her fierce likeness graces the Jamaican $500 bill, a daily reminder to millions of the cost and value of freedom. Queen Nanny of the Maroons stands as an immortal symbol of resistance, an indomitable force who proved that physical chains are powerless against a mind and a spirit that refuse to be enslaved. In the heart of the Blue Mountains, where the mist still clings to the green peaks and the Abeng still echoes in the wind, the spirit of the Unconquered Queen lives on. A timeless testament to the eternal human truth that freedom is not a gift given by masters, but a right fought for and won by the brave.